Chapter 160. The fall wind blows with the promise of rain over the deserted road. Adrian stands over the trampled dirt of the flat road in his impeccable beige suit, an exquisite transplant in an otherwise drab garden. His essence and mine meet in the middle where they touch but do not mix, setting a frontier that we both respect, for now. I am still not used to this new sensation of existing outside of my body. Urchin and John take a few steps back. In a contest of lords, all other combatants are merely different magnitudes of flies. You will have to offer an extremely convincing argument, Adrian, because my current options are to kill you, or report you to the Accords and watch Ignis torture then kill you. The Roland Lord sighs minutely. I have him. May we talk somewhere? I would not want to be interrupted. Are you surrendering yourself to me? I cannot. He means it. His words carry a weight of conviction that I can taste on his essence, but only because he allows it. For a moment, I entertained the thought of going back to a clearing we passed by on the way, but I quickly crushed those parasitic remains of a time when I was much weaker. He will not get a single concession from me. The balance of power is firmly in my favor. Then this place will serve. Adrian leans slightly forward in a predatory gesture that speaks of a deluge of claws. I let him. Metis turns her head to consider him in that peculiar judgmental manner she has. I am stronger than him even without the armor. His shadows mean nothing because the thorns will find him no matter where, in whatever form he has chosen, and they will rip him to shreds. Try your luck, or do not, but stop wasting my time, I tell him. Adrian hisses softly. It speaks of defeat. We never intended to face you. Our arrangement throughout the Civil War has been very fruitful, and we know you to honor your bargains. We were trapped by Benoit, Warden of Virginia. I remember him. He commands the opposition to Safar's faction. An ambitious man with the demeanor of a brilliant scholar. Benoit summoned Adam to his estate for the sake of coordinating the reconstruction effort, or so he claimed. He called him a traitor to the cause instead and had him imprisoned. I am to obey Benoit's directives or my brother dies. I do not need to tell you what happens if they find out that we are cooperating. This makes little sense, and yet Adrian is open and his truthfulness is beyond doubt. A territory will never be worth alienating to powerful lords when its custody depends on a larger system. There is more than what you're telling me. Perhaps, but I was only able to discover little. Adam was tortured by someone talented. His clothes were returned by Lord Lowick, the new warden of Tennessee, who immediately took over our spy network. Lowick is Benoit's creature and a man of the shadows. My eyes and ears were stolen from me before I could even deploy them. I only managed to gather snippets from illegal outings. Lowick has taken over my place of residence. He grits his teeth and his gaze focuses on me. The beast is close to the surface. It must take a colossal effort for him to retain his will. They have moved a significant amount of monetary resources to the attack, but the amount of schemers involved remains small because Lowick has to make excuses to his own side for lack of commitment to ongoing projects. Those are the actions of a secret cabal. The problem is that without prior knowledge of my brother's current location, any attempt on my part to take revenge could end his life. I will not accept that. Never. Metis moved slightly, sensing my agitation. I reign in my imagination. It will be of no use right now. Benoit's motives matter less than discovering the means of stopping him and his group. Unfortunately, a direct approach will not serve us here. Even if we capture Lowick, which would be complex, his absence will be remarked on long before we can extract the truth from him. Roland lords are notoriously difficult to break. Adrian's expression darkens further at the reminder of what his brother has done though, but I can sense the determination under that. I have lit the flames of hope in his heart, which means that he is ripe for the taking. We need to involve Safar. I do not have the spy network to find out what Benoit is up to. I'll lift a hand to stop his protests. I will use a mirror spell and require her to be cautious. I know that you have little reason to trust her, but I assure you that she will take every precaution to safeguard Adam's life if I am the one to request it. In the meanwhile, the masquerade must be kept. I will return your agents and we will coordinate to pretend that you are still attacking me. It is too much, and Adrian realizes the trap too late. The beginning of a smile freezes on his lips. Of course, I have conditions. Name them, he hisses. You will be part of my faction now and for the next century. Whatever I vote for, you vote for. Whatever I fund, you fund, within reason. My battles are your battles. You will be, for all intents and purposes, my subordinates. For 100 years. Are you mad? I do not reply. Instead, I step down from medicine come to face him. Rose materializes in my hand. There were choices to be made, Adrian. The ones you picked hurt my friends and my interests. You did it because I was away and you thought us weak. You were wrong. I have absolutely no reason to spare you. I spared your second and your courtiers. That is good, or we would not be having this conversation. You must understand this. We devourers are jealous masters. My mortals are mine to the last wagon driver. My mages belong to me to the youngest apprentice. My wolves run for me when I call them. Their lives were not yours to reap, and now you will bend and commit to my banner for a century or you will die. Choose. I care not. He already revealed enough. I can place a name and a face on my mysterious foe, and Adrian's help is no longer needed. Be careful, Ariane. Your ascension was swift, and those in your position often make enemies they might regret later. While you are regretting yours now. Enough talk. I accept. I will have to take solace in Benoit's fall and, hopefully, his ignominious end. Do not push your luck too far, Ariane. For the offender in this affair, you certainly show me hatred. Save it for your true tormentor. Oh, young one. My heart has room for all the hatred in the world. I scoff. This man is not Malakim. He does not know true hatred. We need to return to Chicago for now. There's much to plan. One of Meluson's courtiers leads me into her mirror room. His name might be Donald or Duncan or something similar. To be perfectly honest, I had forgotten that Meluson had followers. She recruited them young and they are still undergoing training, therefore they were useless and hidden during the conflict. Typical of the redhead. I close the door behind me and sit in front of the communication spell's focus. It does not show my reflection, of course. Without touching it, I fill it with power and reach for the blonde vampire's location. A pulse crosses the space between us and the mirror's surface shimmers and undulates like wind blowing on the surface of a pond. It takes some time for the pulse to find an echo, which does not surprise me. Few individuals can claim to have Sapphire's ear at their convenience. The ripples merge and gain color, resolving into the petite and seemingly demure Hastings lady. She wears an intricate teal dress that leaves her shoulders bare. Ariane. We may have a problem. I quickly expose the recent developments and my findings, summarizing the liberation of Illinois in 3 sentences while expanding on Adrian's revelations and my own conclusions. Goodness me, yes, this is preoccupying. It just feels so short-sighted to me. With this action, Benoit endangers his reputation and the very existence of his faction. And for what? There's more territory to snatch than there are powerful vampires right now. Yes, although, not every territory is currently worth the effort it would take to grab it. Imagine trying to establish a coven of cultural and sophisticated immortals in Arkansas. In any case, please get Adrian here so that we may learn where to start. I call upon the Roland and maintain the spell while Sapphire questions him with meticulous attention. She asks him how many mercenaries an agency has employed, how much they are being paid and how much the supplies would cost. Adrian was recently cut off from his possessions, but he was the one to handle the shadier aspect of the twins' business and his knowledge of his own logistics does him credit. Ariane was correct. This operation is completely unsustainable. Loic must be receiving funding from outside and I suspect that the entire operation might be used to distract us from some central scheme. Could it be related to Mask? I ask. I did not follow up on internal Accords politics while I was with the Knights. I did, however, get acquainted with European power dynamics. The expansion faction has successfully united their wayward covens across Europe's colonies. Only we remain, and only because we have both the unified government and the military power to back it up. I have kept an eye on Martha. There has been no build-up of forces recently. In any case, I do not wish to waste time on conjectures. I will see how our Virginian friend employs his money. It should give us a hint. In the meanwhile, please prepare a plan to neutralize Loic in a way that we have enough time to turn him, or Adam will be in danger. We need him pliable so that we can move more freely. Ariane. Any ideas? I have one that could work. I will require some assistance, and it also depends on a specific condition. I turn to my neighbor. Adrian, how much would Loic want to capture me alive? There are times where immediate and overwhelming violence is not an answer, or so I have been told. I argue that there are two types of diplomacy. The first exists between people searching for common ground. In this case, diplomacy allows both sides to benefit as part of a positive-sum game where each participant has a chance to increase their own well-being. The second exists when one side's purpose is completely unacceptable to the other. For example, the newly formed Integrity Party considers the existence of supernatural creatures as unacceptable while we would very much prefer to stay alive. In those instances, diplomacy is merely the continuation of overwhelming force by other means. The White Cabal advocates moral superiority in taking the high road. I wish them good luck in their endeavors as I pull the trigger. The rifle roars between my hands, propelling a little cone of lead at amazing speed through Representative Hopeful Holst as he exits a house of ill repute. The projectile bores through his chest and splatters his lung on the wall of this fine establishment. An employee screams. Her dress is ruined. Tragic. I pick up the rifle and drop out of sight. For all their talks of faith, most integrists look down on those who lend the other cheek. They are filled with the burning passion of righteous outrage. If they win, it is not that the other side respected the law. It simply means that God is on their side. Thus, my intervention shall act as a reminder that they are not invincible and that their champion was not as pure as he claimed, depriving them of a martyr. Every little bit helps. I jump across roofs back to the office Safar lent me while I reside in her city. We have much to arrange and Marquette is quite safe right now. I let myself in through the window and remove the black cloak I wore for the occasion. Under, I wear one of the normal blue dresses I use for business. The design is simple and includes a heart protector. The fabric shows enough care to indicate wealth while keeping a conservative appearance to lure others into a false sense of normalcy. It will suffice. I sit down in front of an empty table in my office to clean and disassemble the rifle I used. The mundane task soothes me. The world has moved on while I was away. It is a fact of life that I had not anticipated and that I now apprehend. I had previously lived through many changes in government, of course, but this is different. The mundane humans know of magic. Some countries already outlawed it completely. My eyes travel to the newspaper placed on my desk. Louisa Pasteur executed this morning by firing squad. She is the first person to be officially slain for the crime of sorcery in a long time. Louisa was an untrained witch with a small quirk. Her power went out of control during an argument with her husband, causing his accidental death. It could have been manslaughter were it not for the means used to push the poor man against that fateful chimney frame at the worst possible angle. Unfortunately, using magic to harm people is now punishable by death, no matter the circumstances, and no matter the result. The accidental nature of the death only gave the Integrists the ammunition they needed to show how dangerous magic could be. Never had a man's broken neck caused such a pain in my own backside. I know where this is going. I am not surprised when a knock on my door comes an hour later. One of Safar's men announces the coming of a visitor. He wears a tuxedo with white gloves and a cane like the rest of them, a uniform that Safar picked for them. Some of the goons look like circus bears in this outfit, which I find amusing. Come in. A man in a navy suit enters the room. He grasps a bowler hat between nervous hands. I smell fresh sweat and terror in the air, fear in his shifting blue eyes. Those who know of me without knowing me always react in the same manner. Is it wise? He finally asks. I maintain eye contact while I keep cleaning the gun, which is an old model I know well. It only unnerves him more. Mr. Holst was killed on the doors of a famous brothel. Sadly, a note will be found in his breast pocket concerning a debt he contracted 3 years ago and remains outstanding. A regrettable affair, but one should not give lessons when they are sinners themselves. Let him cast the stone, and so on. Was he that dissolute? He did receive some money from a relative 3 years ago to purchase a property here. It is such a shame that this relative died and the source of this gift shall remain dubious. That is quite a low blow. No, sir, I shot him in the heart. That is not. I meant. I know what you meant. Newspapers will smear his name by dawn, and now the integrists have lost quite a charismatic leader. You think that I am being too harsh? We are not murderers. I glare and he has enough backbone to take a deep breath and to stand his ground. You are not, and this is to your credit, I suppose. Now I assume that you have your license? Yes. May I see it? He hesitates, then removes a mundane piece of paper from his breast pocket. It shows his name and description in clinical details. The term wizard appears in bright red letters below the stamp of the Ministry of Supernatural Affairs, its seal showing a reverse blade hanging over the name like a sword of Damocles. A fitting image. If a sovereign puts your name on the list, you are either a nuisance or about to be taxed. You cling to notions of respectability, and I commend you for it, but you are also a rich little man living in a mansion in Washington. You are a useful activist whose role during the Civil War clads you in an aura of respectability living in a lawful and police city. Others will not share your good fortune. So wash your hands and your conscience of my deeds, if you must. Veil your eyes with the belief that your exemplary behavior will move the masses to new heights of morality, since you believe in mankind's goodness. I know the truth and I will resort to the same tools as our foes, because this is the only thing they will understand and respect. An eye for an eye will leave all of us all blind, vampire. Only those removed from disaster can allow themselves this sort of sophistry, but since you served me an expression, sir, allow me to reciprocate. V Victus. We are not at war. I stand up and pick the newspapers, which I throw at his feet. And yet blood has been shed by both sides. We remain silent for a minute or so, during which I finish cleaning and placing the gun back in its case. The lady Safar warned me that you had a more hands-on approach to problem-solving. I just hope that it does not cost us too much goodwill. I will condemn this action and express my condolences at daybreak. I hope that your logic does not throw us in the precipice of war we are trying so hard to avoid. Best of luck to you. He leaves and I return to the desk to check my correspondence for the night. The main point of interest is a letter in a cream envelope addressed to me in person. I am cordially invited to join the extraordinary conclave of the White Cabal in response to the creation of the first supernatural task force. This is not the sort of event that I can afford to miss. I write a formal reply and ring a small bell. A moment later, the doorman answers my summons. Please have this letter sent, then bring me the memo on the supernatural task force, thank you. Understood, ma'am. I have my document a minute later, brought by a mousy intelligence expert. Let us see. The government is hiring mages to deal with mages under the supervision of selected officials. I wonder if they can be at all infiltrated. The book of disinformation Sinead wrote has already become a bestseller, but the higher level of the government must have access to more precise briefings, including on how to protect themselves against us. We shall see how Constantine and Safar want to play it out. My focus must remain on the supernatural alliance. This is more my area of expertise. One cannot be good at everything. Like singing. Curse singing. I sigh and prepare to pack. 2 days later, near Avalon. When the White Cabal first made their lair in the wilderness west of New York, they may not have anticipated their drastic growth. As one of the only two organizations to enjoy an alliance with me in a relative truce with the rest of us, the Cabal has found itself a durable species lacking natural predators, with the expected result. They have been fruitful and multiplied to cover all of the earth, or at least all of it between New Brunswick and Princeton. What started as a refuge has now grown into a tentacular network of connected towns kept safe by a comprehensive system of wards, patrols, and good old-fashioned distrust of strangers. My carriage would have been interrupted a dozen times were it not for uniformed guards riding along. I cannot blame them for their caution. Hamlets succeed to forests, small subsistence farms, and active factories. The cabal is almost entirely self-sufficient, and they export high-quality consumer goods to afford what they cannot create themselves. Shoemakers and textile mills stand next to small foundries. The strategy is a bit backwards, although affluence has never been their primary purpose. Safety is. They do not enjoy the sort of anonymity our small numbers afford us. I am still musing when we drive into a ravine dotted with tall sycamores and the head horses neigh in distress. The convoy stops. The head soldier draws a pistol and scrutinizes whatever his lantern reveals. Who goes there? He demands with the courage of those who defend their home. I sigh and open the door. Their attention turns to me. By the time they follow my gaze, Adrian stands squarely in the middle of the path in a long beige duster. He wears a fox mask, which I will admit is quite a nice touch. The head guard is less impressed. By God! Is this? You may want to back down, my good man. This is not an opponent you can face, I tell him. Leaves crunch under their footsteps as they dismount and fall back. The scent of fresh sap and rotting vegetation caresses my nose with a small burst of wind. A hint of vampire spice comes with it. The scent reminds me of Tauron. Adrian's aura spreads and touches my own. Although he does not move, a sort of pull attracts my attention to a massive boulder on my left. I appreciate the delicate attention, but there was no need. All my instincts scream and I use a lazy mirage spell to create a decoy and take a step back. A spear shrieks through the air where my heart used to be. It clangs noisily against a nearby rock in a deluge of shards. If this is what passes as aura control around here, I cannot blame the Europeans for looking down on us, I casually say. My attacker rises from behind his hiding place like an opera highwayman. He wears proper male armor, which I can respect. The enchantments show that he cares for it, while a few scars on its black surface show use. A black mask hides his features, though I recognize Loic from the aura alone. You are quite chatty for a trapped little minx. I bet that you are regretting your early return, right now. Do not be alarmed. We will not kill you. We merely need your presence for a project of ours. You can be our guest. If this is a masquerade, you merely had to send an invitation to the Boston Fortress, Lord Loic. My remark stops him in his tracks, but only for a moment. Ah, you must recognize our auras from the council. It appears that your reputation as an airhead was slightly exaggerated. Only imbeciles base their strategies on hearsay, Loic. I could recognize every member of the council in their seconds. And for a kidnapping attempt, you should have taken a better spot. I think you may be overestimating the White Cabal, my dear. But I am not one to monologue for too long, and we do have to kill your escort as well, so you will forgive me if we cut this conversation short. I block a quickly manifested black spear and dodge under Adrian's blade. I cast Mirage then dodge against a roaring sweeping attack. I fight my way out of the ravine by using trees as obstacles and rocks as platforms. Loic fights with casual grace while Adrian supports him with limited commitment. Loic is annoyed. I see it in the impatience of his follow-up strikes, though he will never admit to it. Our contest of strength continues and leaves behind shorn trunks and upturned stumps. I manage to rake his flank, but Adrian deflects the blade with an attack of his own. I stop at the edge of a small pond. Well, young one, where is the proof that you are one of ours? I will not need it. Darkness. The shadows spread over the land as Loic laughs and laughs, amazed at my stupidity. Adrian is in his element now. Magna Arca, the twin whispers. The Roland Lord disappears in the spell just as Loic's hilarity redoubles. Then he chokes. And screams. How dare you, you traitor? Magna Arca. I do not let the spell drop. Loic's spirit gains an ethereal quality, and so does he. My first attack passes him by as he jerks away at the last moment. He tries to run out of the cloud. Traitor? Adrian says, you call me traitor after what you have done? You have no shame. I force another moment of ethereal shift with a lunge at his leg and cast immediately. Promethine. The chain spell, Constantine's specialty, latches on the man's arm despite his shift. Loic strikes down and manages to pin one of the 7 links I manifested to the ground, breaking it. Adrian's next attack digs a furrow along his flank through the armor. Loic drags me closer through the magical construct. He is stronger than me. "This will not hold me," he spits. "It was not meant to," I retort. "Promethine," a deep voice says. More than 30 golden chains are vomited by a phantomatic silhouette at my back. They curve around my right and gather around an already immobilized Loic, pinning him down under an extraordinary weight. The surprise is too much for a Loic, who gasps. I can also say from experience that the exercise can be painful when the caster wants it, and this one definitely does. I let the darkness spell fade to reveal Constantine's dark eyes glaring from above his hooked nose, the speaker majestic for once in a red battle robe brimming with enchantments. Loic's surprise is complete. It immediately turns into outrage. "You!" Before he can throw a single slur, Constantine raises a hand, causing a few golden links to tighten around the captive lord and stealing his breath. Let me summarize the situation for you. Benoit unlawfully captured Lord Adam of the Roland without provocation and tortured the keys to his information network out of him, following which you were sent to their land to exhaust his means in another unlawful attack against a member of the Accords in good standing. Would you care to rephrase the term traitor? The chains relax slightly and Loic vociferates as if he was not trussed like a deer. You are all playing this stupid game where you think you are a real faction. You only survived Mask's previous attempt as a fluke. We will not fall with you. Ah, the self-realizing prophecies of people torpedoing their own ship because they believe it will sink. No matter, I gather from your lack of denial that you find my accusations accurate. We will need the location of Lord Adam from you. Now. Loic opens his mouth to curse but seems to reconsider. A slow smile spreads across his keen features. Constantine remains unfazed. So you know where he is. Sapphire was right, it seems. Silence can be so incredibly loud. Let us see how long you can keep that smile on. Ignis. A man I wish I never saw again emerges from behind us. He is one and gaunt with an angular face and pale eyes the color of watery hydrangea. He also tortured me until my mind broke. Even decades later, I have to resist the urge to pull on my fingers. The effect on Loic is much more dire. You wouldn't dare. Adrian takes a deep breath and we turn to him, surprised at the flare in his aura. Before we begin, if you will permit me? We remain silent. I highly suspect that Constantine has no idea what the offended Roland is talking about, that is, until the man jumps on Loic and pummels his face with great enthusiasm. I watch the spectacle, mesmerized, and wonder if we will have to wait for the head to regrow, but it appears that our ally removed his gloves before the cathartic event. Give me back my brother. This goes on for half a minute, then Adrian stands up. He is all yours. Thank you kindly, Constantine replies, acerbic. The blood archmage moves his gauntlet and the captured lord is dragged back to Ignis, who takes down his backpack to reveal its grisly content. A memory comes to my mind, unbidden. Which fingers? 1, 4, 8. No. 9. I stop a shiver before it begins. Ignis's eyes are on me. Many hold a grudge for what I have done to them, what I represent. I bare my teeth. You went above and beyond. I will not forget. No, he nods, you haven't. That is why you called upon me to advance your plan. The other two are studiously ignoring our exchange, busy as they are attaching Loic to a nearby horizontal stone. It appears that Ignis is confident that he will only need a few hours. Or is this merely the preliminary work? I have not replied and so Ignis continues. We live very long lives, long enough for deadly rivals to become friends and vice versa. Now that you are in power, I have merely turned into one more tool in your arsenal. Be careful. Of course, Melody. Wardens may come and go but a good torturer is so hard to find. I shall serve your cause well. Now, if you allow me access to the patient. Chapter 161. Is it her? She doesn't look like much. What did you expect? A tail. Bat wings. The young guard crossed his arms defensively. Hazel was against ribbing, but this time, the little twat had it coming. Shut up, you two. Vampires have excellent hearing, she said in a low voice. Joel sulked in silence while the older man, Willis, gave her a irate glare. She widened her eyes in the universal "are you going to say something" message, and he relented. It chafed Willis to be under her because he, too, had fought at Black Harbor. That made him a veteran of the Scourge War. It just didn't make him a good leader. He still hadn't got it. Hazel held her gaze for another second. Willis was getting to be a pain in her arse, but so long as he remained professional, she wouldn't act. Rules were in her favor. Politics was not. Fucking politics. Roth, stop scratching your ass, Jesus. The hairy soldier jumped and straightened. His uniform stretched over a small potbelly that had never disappeared even during the lean months of the war. Poor Sod was not the brightest, but he was trying. The last member of the fiery team, Moyes, stood straight as a rod in perfect silence, every brass button shining on his impeccable vest. He was holding a repeater polished to a shine and looked straight ahead instead of gawping at the newcomer. Like her, he didn't have politics on his side, and so he made sure that he had everything else. The vampire slowly made her way to Avalon's spider gate, looking incongruous with her exquisite lavender dress against the background of ancient forest. The evening wear was the sort of custom work that cost an arm and leg. Hazel had to admit that she was a little bit envious before reminding herself that this was a monster. She would not envy monsters, or associate any sort of normal emotions with them. That's how they got you. Welcome to Avalon, ma'am. Name's Hazel's Lick. My fiery team and I are charged with your safety. Our first task is to escort you through the compound and to the council room, where the archmages are waiting. Are you ready to depart? There, all prime and proper. The vampire nodded once. Her hair was held high in a complicated hairdo. It was slightly asymmetrical, as if readjusted in a hurry. There was a gash on the carriage, she realized. Hazel frowned. Something happened, ma'am. Nothing to concern yourself over, Corporal. Please lead on. Hazel removed the concern from her face. She had a mission and she would get it done. Let the brass worry about the rest. This way, she said. Her 4 squadmates closed around her and the vampire, as if she needed any sort of protection. Hazel took out her key from her uniform vest and inserted it in the metal gate's lock. Something shone briefly. She knew that there were wards and alarms, though how it worked was beyond her. Some magical thingamabobs. The key turned once more with the clank of released mechanisms before the imposing steel slab rotated on well-oiled hinges with nary a sound. They moved on. Hazel took a last look behind at the carriage they had left. A single lantern shone at the edge of the spider wood like a candle at the edge of a nightmare. She had to remind herself that the woods were just old and gnarled and that the true monster stood by her side, looking all proper and smelling vaguely of jasmine. Oh, I forgot. Do you have any luggage? Hazel asked as an afterthought. Damn, did she already fuck up? I have what I need with me. The rest will be delivered through the front door. The vampire daintily reached into a recess in her skirt and pulled out a black castor glove with nasty obsidian knuckles, because of course that thing would have pockets. She put it on in one smooth move, without looking, and fastened the clasps with slow and precise movements. There was nothing too predatory yet. She was slow and graceful. The only weird thing was how she was not looking around and yet still managed to evade the occasional puddle of mud. Hazel felt like she didn't depend on sight that much, and that was just a tad off-putting. Little things, really. The path from the spider gate first led them through a thicket of oaks, a remnant from when that place was just untamed wilderness. They emerged on the other side through peripheral barracks meant for scouts returning past midnight. The academy was further away. That late, no one was out except the odd patrol. Hazel shivered in the fall air, even if it wasn't that cold yet. A gust of wind rustled the leaves until she finally found the silence abhorrent. Empty. The vampire was just by her side, and suddenly it didn't feel like such a good idea to imagine what she, or it, could do. The memory of Black Harbor came back, unbidden. Steel-clad forms cleaving through huge drones with practiced ease. A shower of bone and itcher with every strike. She had tried to reload, but her old rifle was so hot that it had burned her fingertips. It had not mattered. None of the drones had made it through. Hazel's gaze landed on the woman's pale fingers and caught a hint of onyx claw. Her breath hitched in her throat and perspiration made her back wet. She shivered again. The vampire sniffed the air. "So, will you be staying at the inn?" Hazel asked. Her voice had only wavered a little bit. "No. That place is not secured. I have made other arrangements. I'm sure that the Black Dog could accommodate. I have an understanding with his predecessor, Mr. Hopkins." No one said a word, though she harbored no doubt that they were all as curious as she was. There were murmurs. "Fuck it," she wanted to know. "Is it true that you two faced each other in combat?" "Traps, mostly. Hopkins is far too cunning to attack one of us directly. He almost gave me a fright." There was amusement in the vampire's voice, and Hazel felt a smile on her lips. She killed it immediately. "Ah, thank you for indulging me," she continued. That was probably the polite thing to say. "Not to worry. Since we started talking, you smell less of fear, which is desirable. And so does our escort." Hazel almost froze in her tracks. An escort? But then someone swore from behind a trunk 30 paces to her right, and she lifted her rifle. Her barrel was stopped by the unyielding grip of the vampire. "None of that now. They are also white cabal." "I didn't know." For some reason, that pissed her off. Didn't they trust her? Why didn't they tell her anything if they were going to send nannies to watch every last step? She grit her teeth, but she kept going. There was nothing to do. "Not like you need any more protection," she said out loud this time. "You are not protecting me," the vampire stated. "Then what are we protecting?" "The peace." More cryptic bullshit, just what Hazel needed. There was not much to do except moving on. Her squad soon arrived at the expanse of kept grass surrounding the White Cabal's political heart. The more Hazel looked at the circular building, and the weirder it got. The columns and fancy exterior reminded her of the government buildings back in Washington she had seen once towards the end of the Civil War. It was like a government outside of the government, and that was all sorts of strange. It was also built with white stone, to the contrary of most everything else around here. Hazel thought that it stuck out like a sore thumb, but what did she know? Rich folks probably had their reasons. So we have arrived. We'll escort you in, unless you have orders or something." "No, I do not have orders," the vampire replies offhandedly. Hazel blushed when she realized her blunder, but the vampire didn't seem to mind. "What I expect is for you to lead me up the steps and announce my presence. Then your council will make me wait for a few minutes because they are a pack of grumpy old trouts and they can get away with it. A few hours of speech and grandstanding will follow. After that, we will retire to a place I shall inform you of at the time of departure to spend the rest of the night." "Oh. Okay." There was a soft hiss, then the vampire forced a smile. "Proceed." Hazel moved on with her squad, dutifully keeping formation. Their mysterious escort stayed in the woods, though she caught a hint of mage armor and assumed that they were there as insurance. Typical. She climbed the marble steps to the council's antechamber and realized that she had never been there before. It was better than she expected. A large, circular corridor extended left and right. It was filled with paintings. Her eyes traveled despite herself. Many depicted landscapes, meadows, cities seen from afar, and even an enchanting sea, both blue and gray, that almost melted into the cloudy sky above. Those were relaxing and absorbing, but the paintings that bordered the entrance to the central chamber were different. She mechanically announced the vampire's presence to some pajasso dressed like a butler, but her attention was on the work behind his head. It depicted a line of soldiers in dark uniforms executing a group of civilians. The light centered on a man in white, arms stretched in supplication or to cover those behind. She couldn't tell. There were bodies on the ground. Blood too. El Thursday Mayo by Francisco Goya. The soldiers on the right are Napoleon's occupation force in Madrid. The people on the left rebelled the day prior. It's different from the others. It remains a revolutionary work in every sense of the term, though I suspect that your council placed it here as a reminder. A reminder of what? That people die. She spat. The work of art was so poignant. It grabbed her by the chest and didn't let go. It annoyed her that someone would use this as a deliberate tool. It was meant to be free. Yes, that, and the dangers of tyranny I supposed, but the warning is also for the councillors themselves. You see, Francisco Goya supported the revolution before it soured into an aggressive empire. Many forces start as protectors of freedom and justice. Few manage to keep to those ideals. That must have stung. For the artist I mean. Ah yes, poor Pender. I managed to acquire one of his works. Such a talented individual. You did. Saturn devouring his son. Ah, the circus begins. The butler guy invited the vampire in. For some reason they didn't close the door and Hazel could see the court inside. They had a central open space, then big chairs hosting old coots and fineries, then lesser geezers and lesser fineries above that, all in concentric circles of wealth and age. A large man with a small hammer, a gavel maybe, had an entire side to himself. He looked quite tired. Ladies and gentlemen, please reveal and verify your protective amulets, thank you. Everyone has done so? Good. The council welcomes the ambassador of the Accords, Ariane of the Nirari. You have the floor. Thank you. I will be brief. You should have all received the report we compiled on the Supernatural Task Force by now, including the agenda for implementation. Their avowed function is to monitor and police America's magical population. We, however, believe that they will be used as a tool of control to list and monitor us, as a first step. Once the Congress and the White House have a firm idea on the current magical landscape, they will use it to shape their policies, up to and including extermination. The Accords propose the creation of a committee to coordinate actions on and against units of the task force that endanger us in one way or another through infiltration and coercion. It must happen now while the hierarchy is still being selected. That is all. She stopped speaking and Hazel waited for the rest. That was all? Most politicians really liked speaking. Maybe they were like that in private and saved the big words for public events. Those always made her drowsy. She wondered why the vampire wasn't trying to be smoother. They were supposed to be good at it. Thank you, Ambassador. Now for the questions. Anyone? Everyone. All right, we will do this by seniority. The chief librarian has the floor. Who's in charge of that idea and why haven't you killed him yet? An old woman asked. Hazel couldn't see her from here yet the voice carried a great deal of annoyance. Senator Williams from Massachusetts, and we believe that the task force remains the better option because, how is that a better option? Will they be putting all our names on a list to grab us at dawn and drag us to the pyres? There was a moment of silence and Hazel leaned forward under the disapproving glare of the butler. The vampire was sitting in a comfortable chair, reclining as if it were a throne. Her talon beat a little staccato on the polished arm. Tick tick tick. It resonated terribly in the following silence. And we believe that the task force remains the better option, the blonde woman, no, vampire, continued, because this solution involves mages every step of the way and because all of the alternatives are worse. We do not go against the grain. The Integrists will take southern states by a landslide in the next election. They are a bunch of inbred morons. They couldn't take their own asses with both arms. Once again, the vampire stopped talking and the atmosphere grew heavier. Really. And perhaps a little cold. Some of the attendants shifted in their seats. Hazel was familiar with the concept of aura, but she also knew that it was rude to use it on someone. It felt like you were being pushed by an unseen hand, but this was different. The room was deeper. Larger, perhaps. And darker. And then the vampire audibly sighed and everything returned to normal. The butler blinked and readjusted his tie. Moise rolled his shoulders. I would advise you not to underestimate the power of a mob. The integrists will ride on a tide of resentment. If a legal, legitimate organization is not in place by the time they reach Congress, they will push for more drastic measures. We cannot undo centuries of fear and resentment through assassinations. She leans forward. Or we would have done it, of course. Next question. Right. Next is Finance Minister and Opposition Leader, Heffenstadt. Thank you, President. Now, please tell us what is preventing me from walking to Archmage Lewis, who still heads the ministry in Washington, and telling him to hunt all of you monsters. You, the werewolves, and those fake creatures? HM. The inflammatory comment was received with a roar of disapproval from the majority, but quite a few people cheered as well. Insults streamed across the amphitheater. Order. Order. Councillor Heffenstadt, you are out of line. I will answer, the vampire said. Calm progressively returned. The vampire still lounged on the throne, no, in her seat, Hazel corrected. Mundane people fear us. I am including the Kastner population in that statement. They fear all of us, even that washerwoman whose only quirk is to make clothes smell like flowers. And rightly so. If someone can access a power and you cannot, and they have hidden it until now, how can you trust them? What if they can influence your thoughts? Where are the limits? Right now, the world is awakening to a new dimension with unknown limits and they are afraid. Entire regions of Europe have outlawed any and all magic. It will happen here as well unless we whitewash our image. Now is the time to present an affable face as Lewis has managed to do so far. You will be rich, and clean. Handsome and pale. Your powers shall be obvious and useful. Government mages will wear easily recognizable marks and work under the direction of respectable and pious men, and still, you will be scorned. It will still take decades before you can appear to the general public without the stench of sulfur marring your public personae. No, indeed, now is not the time to give the opposite side more resources, because that mud will stain us all and the mundane population will not be able to tell the difference. The vampire shifted a bit and Hazel followed the languid gesture. It was a lie, of course, all a lie. The vampire had no need to move. It was just a mask. I assure you, acting against us right now isn't in your best interest. Hazel knew a threat when she heard one. She didn't think that it would work against Heffenstadt, but it didn't matter, he was just trying to get a rise. Waste of time. More questions came after that. There were a few about the Accord's opinions on several matters, which the vampire succinctly explained. Inquiries on the Accord's capabilities and military were politely yet firmly shut down. By this stage, Hazel wondered how important the Accords were exactly. Anyone who held a weapon in Avalon was taught of their existence and not to engage, yet for all those efforts she couldn't think of anyone who had met one of their agents. That was weird. Very few people talked about meeting vampires since the end of the war as well. Were they hiding? It would not be difficult. There were so few of them. Barely a few hundreds, spread across a large land. Perhaps that was for the best. Thank you for your time, everyone. It is now 2 in the morning. 2 in the morning, interrupting me will not change my decision, Councillor Haynes. We shall retire for the night. Thank you for your time, Ambassador. A collective hum rose Hazel from her torpor. Those old bags were finally done. After listening to them for hours, she wasn't sure what to think. Yes, they knew a lot, but did they have to bicker all the time? It all felt very childish. The vampire was the first to leave. She strode out without hesitation, sparing not a glance to others. Hazel and her squad scrambled after her with middling dignity. "Should we proceed to the place where you'll be resting?" she asked. "Yes. Follow me." Hopkins showed me the way before. Silence returned and Hazel felt no need to fill it. It was dark. She was tired. Had to keep her eyes open. They went past Dunley's, which served a sweet wine she liked, and Barnaby's with its affordable pulp books. Places she knew. The darkness made them menacing and unfamiliar now, and the worst thing was that she didn't know if it was the vampire doing something, or just her nerves. It was Avalon, god damn it, her home. Not some integrist den of drooling assholes. The vampire walked confidently. Hazel could hardly see under what little light the group's soul lantern provided. They stopped in front of what could only be described as a gardening shack at the edge of a pumpkin field. She felt stupid but didn't dare ask questions. The vampire picked a key from behind a log and opened the door for them. She signaled the others and went in first. A part of her brain screamed that she was getting into an enclosed place, alone, with a monster. The more rational one told her that if the monster wanted her dead, there was fuck all she could do. Huh? Joel said as he went in. His youth was showing, but Hazel agreed that this was strange. Avalon's inner perimeter, inside of the walls, was quite large. There was the city, but also production and military facilities. Some fields too. The walls were more here to slow down invaders and provide increased security against spies than anything else. She had never known that places like this also existed. The cabin was a secured location with a small forward square, the visible part, and a much larger back one cleverly hidden under a thick copse of trees and probably a few illusions as well. She spotted 4 beds on the right and a table on the left with chairs, barrels of water, and packed rations. There was even a small open door leading to a privy. She made a note to use it before Ruth did. Sometimes it felt like the man only ate dead skunks. The implication was staggering. Right, everyone settle down. Ma'am, could I have a moment of your time? Certainly, Corporal. They moved outside. Hazel pestered under her breath because she hadn't thought of taking the lantern with her. The night was dark and moonless. New Surrey. A purple light revealed clawed fingers entrapped in a black gauntlet and the vampire's cold, perfect beauty. She was close. Her skin didn't have the pores and blemishes that everybody else had, a bit like a statue. Hazel wondered if men got trapped by that honey pot or if they realized on time that it was too free of defects to be true. What's going on? Hazel asked without preamble. No need to play coy. The vampire knew what she meant. She had to. There will be a coup tomorrow. Hazel gasped. The vampire kept talking without care. A group will attempt to capture and execute a number of councillors during tomorrow's afternoon session. They will attempt to capture and kill me. How do you know? Hopkins, of course. The old fox forfeited the post of black dog to better focus on internal security. A secret police? Of a sort, yes. He shared this detail with me and asked me not to intervene. Hazel looked for signs of deceit, but of course she might as well have stared at a log. The vampire did not move. At all. You're wondering if you can trust me. In truth, your confidence is not required. You merely have to follow orders. Hazel frowned. To guarantee your safety? Precisely. You will watch over me just as you were tasked to. Nothing more, nothing less. I warned you so that you would not be caught off guard. Hazel pondered that for a moment. Why us? Is it because we are who we are? For the first time, the vampire smiled. It was thin and skin-deep, but it did disarm a little bit of the tension that had been building in Hazel's mind. The mundane soldier's only female NCO, promoted on merit, leading a squad of undesirables. Yes. Let us say that the members of the cabal who will conduct their uprising wish for a more traditional ruling body for their organization. You would have no part in it. A curious thing, really. In Europe, the revolutionaries I met were progressive, but here they are conservative. In any case, Hopkins trusts you. That is why you were selected to cover me. Hansel's mind reeled. Hopkins trusted her? She didn't even think that he was aware of her existence, except in reports. The Hound himself. She felt a blush coming to her cheeks while pride swelled in her chest. You should go back in and rest. You will have a long day tomorrow. I'll set up a guard. No need. I will retire at dawn. You are safe until then. We are in charge of your safety. Something rustled behind Hazel and she jumped, turning around to find that the vampire was there. The light still came from her back. Hazel swiveled to find the light hanging in the darkness. The vampire walked by her. Trust me, Corporal Hazel Zellick. I could slaughter my way from here to New York and nothing could stop me. I will survive for a few hours without your monitoring. More seriously, I will need all of you awake and ready tomorrow at dawn, so please do as I say." Dawn came and the squad settled to wait. The vampire had retreated underground, where a large storage room led to a secure place for her. Nothing was happening. For one terribly long hour, she thought that the vampire had manipulated them into doing something strange and unthinkable, until Willis found a note in the supplies they had. "Do not abuse it," it said with Hopkins' hand. She could recognize it anywhere. The note came with a deck of cards. Hazel had one sentry look outside the windows at all times. She would be the second one. Discretion was their sole advantage here, so they should not show themselves. It made their quarters cramped and malodorous. Her uniform was wrinkled. She felt a bit grimy even though she had washed her hands and face with a barrel water. A coup, huh? She supposed that it had to happen at some point. The White Cabal had been through a lot of changes over the past few years. There was resentment going around. Still, at a time like this, it bothered her deeply. It also bothered her that the vampire had been told before they had. The hours passed. Dawn became morning. The sun crept over a cloudy sky. Outside, nothing much was going on. A few pedestrians walked by on morning strolls, and she made sure to stay hidden, not that anyone was paying attention. The first shots rang at around 10. The squad members at rest froze in the middle of a game of poker. "Corporal," Willis asked. "We have our orders. We stay put and do our duty." "Corporal," he insisted, "I can't be on the wrong side." "Are we sure?" Hazel almost lashed out then. Her grandmother had told her never to give an inch or it would be all over, and the old woman had been right. She did not. Willis was not challenging her. He was terrified. His hands shook with panic and sweat covered his wrinkled face. No. She had to be calm right now. Sure, she could be the leader they needed. "Willis, this isn't like your old group, I swear. We're the good guys. Besides, protecting the vampire is important." The more she talked and the more she joined the dots. "If the vampire is assassinated under our custody, the Accords will probably go to war. I don't have to explain to you why that's bad. The best thing we can do for the Loyalists is to keep that thing alive. And we will." Joel stood up and loaded his gun. He made sure that the path down was open and ready. "Maybe they won't find us," he said. No one said a word and the game of cards stopped there. Moyes made sure everyone had enough bullets and went to polish his repeater. It was already shiny enough to use as a mirror. "People coming," Ruth mumbled from the window. "Down," Hazel ordered. She had a look. The cabin had no fire and no light to avoid visibility. A large group of combatants walked past them with guns at the ready. They wore no uniforms. Many of them were mages with gauntlets and grim expressions. They went by without noticing them. "They are going to Hopkins' house." "It's not far," Willis said. "They won't find him there," she said. "No way the hound would be caught in the open. He will have brought his family to safety." The others all nodded. "Then we wait." They didn't have to do it for long. Those they had seen soon returned and spread out. They were clearly looking for something. The sounds of distant detonations still rang across the town. Hazel was afraid, but she had to trust others to do their job like she was doing hers. Sometimes she wondered what her life would have been like if she had just married Simeon the clerk like her father had ordered. If she would be happier being his wife than here, surrounded by enemies. She gripped her rifle tighter and felt the smooth wood of the stock. Moyes placed a cartridge in the chamber of his with a click. It rang like thunder in the silent room. "Hell nah." Ruth waved his hand to get her attention. He signed for one, "Rifle, walking here." She nodded and crawled through the door to unlock it. She then pointed at Willis and Joel to hide on the sides. The rest stayed near the door. The walls of the cabin were deceptively thick. Her squad would be hard to spot. The sound of footsteps came from outside. She didn't move. Someone was by the windows. She held her closed fist to signal the others to wait. Silence. The door handle rattled. She looked at Moyes by the door. His brown eyes were on her. She made the cutthroat gesture to tell him to neutralize the threat. He nodded once. The door opened in her face, blocking her view. She jumped up, heard the smack of wood against flesh. A man fell. She was on him in an instant. He was clearly dazed. He wore civilian clothes with a white band tied over his right arm. She didn't recognize him. Moise and her dragged him in while Ruth closed the door again as silently as he could. They found rope and gagged the man. Willis and Joel brought him to the basement. "All right, one down," she said. 50 to go, Ruth said. They chuckled, but not for long. "Hey, Jimbo, you there?" Someone yelled outside. Hazel gestured frantically and everyone moved up. There were 2 voices now. More came. "He was supposed to be around here," the first voice said. "Maybe he is a bit farther. Still think we're wasting our time." They saw the bitch and the misfits walk in that direction, man, and they never reached the gate. Can't be too far. They could have just left, over the wall or something. Why would they do that? The council is still debating. Fair. Let's check that cabin over there. Hey, Chuck, cover me will you? Yeah. Hazel risked a glance. There were 3 of them. One was a midge with a gauntlet moving carefully towards them. Another was a soldier with a rifle held lazily in his hands, while the last had a revolver. He was checking the woods. Hazel signaled Moise. The black man was their best shot. He took his repeater and aimed. She drew her regulation revolver. The door opened. She shot the closest soldier in the chest 3 times. Time slowed down. Her target lifted a bloody hand and looked at it with disbelief. He was already dead. The rifleman fell with a bullet in the heart. Willis and Joel's bullets pinged on the midge's shield. They didn't have silver. Oversight. The man retreated with a cry, but it was useless. The entire town must have heard shots by now. Distant figures already rushed at them from behind a bend in the road. "All right, everyone, give it to them," she bellowed. The men smashed the windows and started taking pot shots at the enemy troops who jumped to cover and returned fire. The walls of the cabin held fast. They were thick enough that only a cannon could go through. A spell sent wood shrapnel flying by her though. She removed a splinter from her bleeding cheek. "That fucker," she mumbled. For the next 10 minutes, her squad slowed down and only took sure shots. They had to hold. Time was on their side, that was for sure. Moise got a guy crawling forward in the neck. Ruth managed an impressive feat when he got a rifleman in the head through a thin birch tree. "Nice one, Ruth," she said. "I was aiming for the chest." The pump man bellowed as he reloaded. He was nervous. They all were. "Okay, doing well so far. Just had to last. Slow them down. Maybe they would think that it's not worth it." She was trying to convince herself. It wasn't working. Hazel lost her notion of time. Some people tried to flank them, but the cabin only had openings at the front and the brambles were so thick that it would take hours to cut through. She shot someone trying to take a peek. They were trapped. It was only a matter of time before everything went to shit. What were the others doing? She checked her watch. It was 11:30. They had only been at it for an hour, but it had felt like eternity. She was already drained, numb from being on edge for so long. She sponged the sweat from her face and took a swig of water. At least no one was seriously hurt yet. "What's going on there?" an authoritative voice demanded. It was an older midge with a robe covered in talisman. It cut through the haze of the battle. For one naive moment, Hazel thought the man might rescue them, but it didn't happen. A man ran to report to the approaching figure. Moise took a shot. It pinged against a massive shield. The man didn't even turn his eyes to them. "No, you imbecile. The vampire will be underground. Do you want to wait until the fire dies out?" Hazel blinked when she realized that she had been very close to being roasted. Or not. Actually, setting the house on fire might be a good idea, but it was too late to set it up. "All right, you lot in there," the powerful midge said. "You have 1 minute to get out with your weapons down and your arms in the air. Do so and you will be allowed to leave Avalon safely. You have my word." "The Negro dies though," the rifleman added. "No, he does not," the midge added pointedly. The foes waited. Right, Hazel said. Right, make sure the way to the basement is clear. Lock the door. Let's put the table against it. The windows are too small for an adult, so it might save us some time. The team scrambled to shove everything they had against the opening. Willis broke the nervous silence. If anyone thinks to say yes to those assholes, I'll shoot him myself, he grumbled. Not if I get him first, Joel added with scowl. All right, we're all very loyal in here, Hazel said. Now move those hips and grab me that chair. Time is up, the midge declared. The squad fired, but they knew it was useless. All they had was mundane lead. A wall of shields covered the approaching troop. Their only saving grace was that the enemies could not shoot through that shield either. Fuck. Prepare to, Hazel's order was interrupted by a cataclysmic blast. The door's upper half was shattered and pieces of broken furniture rained in. Hazel's gaze froze on the gaping hole left behind, uncomprehending. This place is warded, the midge declared. No matter, the windows are not. Fire at will, men. A torrent of bullets buzzed through the openings. The far wall and most of the furniture turned into a pitted wreck. Hazel had enough. All right, back. Into the basement. She shot blindly to give them a few seconds. Her squad ran. They jumped down. She ran as well. The gunshots stopped. She heard something fall down. The midge was here, well, his head was. He was young with a well-trimmed beard. Quite handsome. He looked serious and uncaring. His gauntlet extended almost lazily. She was going to die. Then a chair smacked into it. The spell went off and demolished a cupboard. Roth was running towards her. Go, he yelled. She did. Rifles roared. She jumped down onto packed earth lit by a yellow lantern. Roth pretty much smashed by her side and rolled over, eyes vacant. Blood spread on the ground. Roth. The greasy man's gaze turned to her. Yes. Are you all right? I don't know. She inspected him. He had a wound in the fat of his left arm. It had gone through cleanly. Otherwise he looked fine. You got shot in the arm. Maybe that's why it hurts. Any other place hurts? He took a few seconds to answer. No? Then stand up. He did so heavily and Hazel bandaged the wound. It didn't look too serious. She just had to get him to a healer before it soured. Moyes jumped down, having secured the hatch. That will get us a few more minutes, the black man said drily. Willis was aiming up to cover them. Joel was reloading. They were in an antechamber of sorts with a ladder going up and a door leading farther in. It was locked. That's the vampire quarters. Should we? The door opened by itself. Come on in, a familiar voice said. They did, and Hazel found the vampire sitting elegantly in a comfortable chair on a background of thick beams and naked walls. She was putting the finishing touches to a sketch she had been drawing. Hazel noticed the sunken eyes and sickly skin. So they did have limits. But, don't you sleep during the day? A common misconception, one we have no intention of clarifying. I take it that our guests found us? Yeah. They are going to go through the hatch really soon. I see. That is quite all right. If things become difficult for you, there is an escape tunnel behind that wardrobe. No, Hazel replied. We'll stay. The vampire returned to her drawings while Hazel pushed herself against the wall, and waited. She had never tried fighting in a room before. It felt like it would be messy. She was afraid. It smelled of gunpowder and perspiration, down here. And blood. Roth was breathing hard enough that the sound went through the ringing in her ears. She forced herself to slow down, let her thundering heart calm. Yes. Calmer. Everything was going to be fine. Everything was going to be just all right. Just relax. Breathe. She just had to open her mind to, oh shit. The door burst open, but Hazel could do nothing. The voice in her head was no longer her own, and, no matter how hard she tried to push it out, it was too late. Her thoughts grew muddled until she didn't know which one were hers and which one were the intruders. Should she fight back? The people in this room. Had to shoot them. Or was it the ones outside? Hazel collapsed against the wall. Her body stayed mostly upright, but her mind kept going down, and down, and down, into the darkness. Hazel was in the room. It was hers, but not hers. It was a bit larger. Here was her bed with the knit cover she had received from Gran, and there was her official contract, signed by Hopkins himself, that announced to the world that she was a corporal, and no one could say it wasn't so. A candle shone, bathing the open space in a dim light. Something was wrong though. "You can't be there," she told the man rummaging through her meager possessions. That wasn't right. It was her. It was hers. But her voice was small and childish, and the man ignored her. She tried to move, and almost collapsed forward. The world was thick and syrupy, and her hands were so tiny, with that scar she got while trying to fish so many years ago. Come on, where is it?" The man grumbled. He was rude. So rude. But he was inside and she didn't have the strength. Finally, he tossed the picture of her first love on the ground and turned to her. He was tall and terrible, and she suddenly felt so afraid. "Well, nothing to it. I will just kill you instead." Hazel almost choked with the anguish of knowing that there was nothing she could do. She waited for death to come. It did not. The man stood up and looked around instead. There was a crash. It should have hurt when that giant thorn trunk ripped through the door, embedding itself into the man's torso before retreating with his twitching corpse attached like a grotesque puppet. And yet, the door was already open to some extent, and so it was sort of fine. Hazel stood up and went to follow without really meaning to. This place was strange. It was playing with her mind. Outside, she found a weird sort of plaza. It was night, she thought. The walls were made of thick walls of vegetation covered in thorns, leaves, and tiny white flowers. A massive statue occupied most of the center. It stood upright inside a white circle and depicted a werewolf of impossible proportions. She was aware that she was small here, and it did not matter. The statue had to be as tall as a building. There were no traces of the man. She looked around and took another few steps forward. The statue seemed to follow her with its eyes until she passed between its muscular legs. They were so big. And the light was strange here. The wrong color. Slowly, her eyes trailed up. Past the edge of the maze they went, to a dark sky, and someone's hand grabbed her shoulder and she yelped. She was turned around with ease. She saw a pair of amused blue eyes belonging to a blonde woman. The woman loomed above Hazel with an indulgent smile. She seemed familiar. "Time to wake up," the woman said. She placed her hand against Hazel's forehead and pushed. Hazel fell with a yelp against the packed earth floor of the basement. Fuck. Hyperventilating. Her mind? No, later. First check on the squad. They were still there, including Roth, who was still alive. They were terrified. Her nostrils flared and brought back the stench of shit. The vampire stood above a mound of corpses. She held Image's neck in one hand, his arm in the other. At first, Hazel thought that the vampire was nuzzling him, but of course that was not the case. She was drinking his blood. The vampire tossed the cadaver aside when she was done. Hazel had not dared interrupt. The issue was, however, that they were stuck in a rank basement with bodies and a vampire. What now? She asked no one in particular. "Well, I suspect that they know I am awake," the vampire said, "so we will stay put until nightfall." "That works for me, Miss Vampire." "Not to worry, I look after my allies. And please, call me Ariane." Hazel watched Ariane gently throw the bodies outside of the door to help with the smell, and decided that the world was quite peculiar and that she was quite happy to still be alive to appreciate it, but now she really needed a glass of whiskey. Chapter 162. Something stirs in the threads of fate. I wish I could remove this pompous, Auvergne sentence from my mind, and yet nothing else can accurately describe the weight on my mind since I returned to my domain. My intuition functions more sharply as long as I remain in my lands, and it hints at something important, something that is not even related to my current worries. The trip to the White Cabal was a pleasant and filling diversion, but the main urgent issue remains. Lord Benoit, Warden of Virginia, attacked me on my domain. Therefore I shall mount his head on a spike. His support was cut with the loss of Loic and the turning of Adrian. Now, it is just a matter of finding him. And there lies the problem. Benoit has disappeared west, past the frontier, with most of his retinue. The prevalence of native populations makes the circulation of information difficult, Lynn says as she hands me a report. Tensions have been high those past years, with colonists expanding relentlessly and the encroached nations sending raiders and war parties. There have been thousands of casualties within the last 5 years, at least. There are also reports that the natives have been using sorcery to increasingly great effect. That would support Constantine's opinion that magic is growing stronger, I idly comment. Lynn nods and reclines on her comfortable couch. We have taken to sitting in front of the hearth in a more casual setting than usual. It is late, after all. We have little to no communication with them. Benoit could be carousing around, putting entire Sioux villages to the sword, and we would not know it. So there are no military reports about a lost band of settlers? I ask, perusing the document. None that would match him and his followers. He has disappeared. The question remains then. What is he seeking? Could it be gold? There have been gold rushes before. I dismiss the possibility almost immediately. I doubt it. All the wardens are currently seizing and developing cheap assets at a record speed. We have never been so rich and influential than now. Benoit has seized much seaside land that should be bringing him dividends. Bah, none of this truly matters. Vampires do not go to war over money. We always have ways to obtain more. No, he must be looking for something different. People? Magic? Perhaps. Unfortunately, there are many different nations over an extremely vast territory. Dakota, Cheyenne, Comanche to name a few, and the frontier is ripe with skirmishes and rumors. We might as well look for a needle in a haystack. I shake my head. There is no helping it. Information gathering is best left to existing networks. Safar's agents are on the move. We will continue to monitor nearby territories but prioritize our new arrangements with Adam in the meanwhile. We have already lost too much momentum in the post-war asset grab. Understood. Lynn departs the room, leaving me alone with a mass of documents to verify and sign. The advantage of being on hand is that my associates tend to be more rigorous and our profits mysteriously increase. The downside is, of course, paperwork. I was made to ride through dark forests spear in hand, hissing and hunting to my heart's content. Year-to-year production of pig meat was never supposed to be part of the deal. Something must have gone terribly wrong at some point. And why do pigs eat so much? I thought they fed on trash. By the watcher, someone distract me from the boredom. Just then, I hear knocks on the door and I watch the dark oak pane with some amount of trepidation. Surely, I did not tempt fate with that last remark. I never voiced it. It remained in my head, therefore, it does not count. Come in, I say with calm and confidence. Urchin comes in looking thoroughly amused. We have a visitor, mistress. He tried to reach you earlier during the day but was turned down. Given his insistence, I found him at nightfall and, after careful consideration, decided that it would be best to grant him his request. He looks far too pleased with himself and my suspicion grows. I frown but only receive the most innocent expression that someone who fleeces cod sharks for fun can achieve. Can't I show him in? He asks, giddy. Very well then. I feel no powerful aura around, no danger, only a mortal in the corridor with a nervous heartbeat. Certainly. Come on in, lad. He says. Urchin moves to the side to reveal a remarkable young man showing clear signs of fear under a layer of courage. He has traits that manage to be familiar and strange at the same time, with a proud, clean-shaven chin and well-styled blonde hair. His handsome face and solid build give him the countenance of a young cavalry commander, both dashing and reliable. He wears a mighty scowl that contrasts severely with Urchin's smug expression. To my utter befuddlement, the youth grabs an object from a recess of his ironed black suit and tosses it on my desk. I pick it up between two claws, sensing nothing amiss. Is that a garlic bulb? I think my mouth hangs open when he retrieves a Bible and what can only be a very sharp stake. He takes a step forward and raises both implements as his powerful baritone fills my office. Beware, foul creature, Slidamonas, Ariandelani. For your curse is at an end. No longer will you drag my family into dangerous ventures. No longer will we bend our backs to fulfill your nefarious purposes. Our secret indenture ends tonight, for I will slay you, or my name is not Alexander Bingle. I see. Me, Ariane. Dragging them. How fucking dare he? Bang. The twit. Bang. The insufferable, ambulatory disaster. Bang. The avatar of collateral damage, the herald of horror. The godling of getting stabbed and shot. The acid aspiration. How dare he, bang. Call me. I come to and realize that I have been smashing my expensive silver candelabra against the hearth's brick lintel, chipping and cracking it. I drop the mangled piece of metal and return to my seat. Urchin stands to my right, and some youth, to my left, paralyzed with fear. He holds a Bible which I find endearing. Right. I massage the bridge of my nose. Where were we? Please give her a minute, Alexander. She is not quite as young as she looks, Urchin says. Yes. The unfair accusations. So let me summarize. You believe that I have been keeping your family in thrall for 3 generations, is that it? And in order to prove it and save yourself, you have crossed the Atlantic Ocean and then several states, finally ending up in a small town in Illinois after at least a month of travel for the express purpose of lifting the tight leash I supposedly have over you. Is that correct? Well. And in order to threaten me, you have armed yourself with a Bible, a piece of sharp wood, and? Please tell me that I am not dreaming and that I indeed have a half-peeled garlic bulb on my mahogany desk, Urchin. I believe that this is correct, mistress. The weakness of vampires to garlics was plainly stated in the Guide to Supernatural Creatures by the famous Simon Need, mistress, Urchin adds. And he mentioned garlic? Preposterous. How could he ever come up with this kooky notion? I cannot possibly imagine, mistress. Apparently, we are also unable to cross flowing water. You. Alexander spits accusingly at his guide, so you are one of them. And, I continue, your strategy was to just walk into my office and shake those things under my nose and I would be undone. He has the grace to look a bit sheepish under all the bluster. Urchin, is it me or do they breed them duller with every generation? Will his children manage to walk and breathe at the same time, do you think? The latest Bingle spotter's in outrage, but Urchin, the traitor, comes to his timely rescue. I believe that this is Mr. Bingle's first outing. The blame could partially be placed on the shoulders of inexperience. Well, she has a solid back, that inexperience, to carry such a burden. Lack of experience indeed. Your first pick was vampire slaying. With a sharpened stake. Why not attack me with a toothpick while you are at it, you worm-brained, donkey-arsed wee bampode? Careful, mistress, Loth's influence is showing. I will not suffer such abuse. The insulted greenhorn declares. My first adventure will also be the last when I pierce your black heart and free us from the curse. My mind goes cold. Anger replaces exasperation. Oh. It takes quite a bit of effort to shove wood through ribs, I will have you know. I speak from experience. How many hearts have you skewered yet? None, and God willing, yours will be the only one. He is with me. I know that you cannot approach so long as I hold the holy symbol and my faith is strong. No, indeed not. So let us put your plan to the test. You will be trying to stab me with a rustic tent peg and I will be using this. I open the first drawer on my right and grab a tiny revolver with a pearl handle and a silver body, which I place in front of me. It would look more appropriate in a salon than on a battlefield. This, I explain, is a customized Smith & Wesson Model 1. It can fire 7.22 caliber bullets before reload and is more than capable of taking down an adult man if its wielder knows how to aim, and I assure you, I know how to aim. Now please tell me exactly how you intend to take me down. You may even assume that I will not stand from this seat as I see absolutely no need to do so. Do elaborate. I am most curious. The latest iteration of the accursed bloodline stares at the gun in front of me with a refreshingly pleasant mix of horror and betrayal. But, yes? If you are fast and strong, why do you need a gun? So I can shoot other fast and strong people as well as the mortals that annoy me. I swear on everything that I hold dear that without my esteem of Cecil Rutherford Bingle, your heroic and kind grandfather, you would be a bleeding mess on the ground right now. I am just figuring out if I should laugh at your dismal intelligence and thorough lack of preparation, or be offended that you would underestimate me so much. You are without a doubt the most inane vampire hunter in the history of the planet by any measure. The young man suffers my lashing in silence, skin crimson but eyes fixed on the gun in front of him. So annoying. But wait. What if? What if it were my turn? After all those years. I freely let a toothy grin expose my fang and recline in my seat, enjoying the sudden shudder racking the worst Bingle's body. A plan starts to form. I spread my arms in a gesture of magnanimity. You know what? I believe that I may grant you a request. I shall solemnly promise never to contact your family to drag them in dangerous and far-fetched quests if. The beginning of hope fades in his eyes as I intone in my most dramatic voice. If you prove your valor by completing 4 tasks. Why would I trust your word, monster? The alternative is that I shoot you in the knee for bothering me and then dunk you in the Mackinaw River with a sack on your head and your hands tied behind your back. I assent. Good. Excellent. To lift the dread curse of Ariane, you will complete a feat of wit, a feat of courage, a feat of intellect, and a final feat of intuition. He narrows his eyes with suspicion. You are being truthful? You will really do so? We vampires cannot renege on our promise without breaking our souls. This is even more valid for a lady. A lady? You are landed nobility? I will send for you tomorrow at sunset to complete your tasks, I finish with a tired voice. Then, I watch with disbelief as he hesitates. Why not start now? The disformed candelabra lodges itself in the wall by his head, showering him with a rain of splinters. Out. Get out. HSSSSSS. As soon as the door closes, I put my head down and moan. He is quite young, mistress. 18 at most, Urchin says. I do not remember ever being this stupid. It was a long time ago for you, mistress. I glare. Sassing me after subjecting me to this treatment, Urchin. Forgive me, mistress. I live to please. Then you're in charge of the contest of wit. Any requirement? Of course. The ordeal must not be dangerous. Instead, we shall achieve the optimal level of annoyance and humiliation. Oh, I have an idea. Do you fancy a bit of poker? Always. Then this is how we will proceed. Asterisk. I open the nicely dressed, nervous Bingle into the high-stake room of Marquette's premier gambling den, property of me, myself, and I.O. I remember the time where a new town councillor attempted to close all such establishments and would not get the hint, but he unfortunately died from 3 stabbing wounds in the chest before the decree could be signed. Self-inflicted. A real tragedy. In any case, the high-stake room has been reserved for tonight's event. Only a dealer, a waitress carrying a glass of liquor on a fancy silver platter and Urchin remain. Velvet and walnut offer a dark, intimate setting while the permeating scent of cigar reminds the visitor of past fortunes lost and found. Gaslights shine through warm yellow glass. I bring the newcomer to the small table where his fate will be decided and leave without a word. Alexander Bingle sits awkwardly. His chair rumbles thunderously against the floor when he adjusts it. The waitress serves him and departs immediately, leaving Alexander nose to nose with the wicked smirk of my associate. He has left his bowler hat behind and his hair is impeccably combed back to reveal an intelligent forehead over the face of a lout and the eyes of a schemer. The vampire speaks first. Good evening, and welcome to the first contest, the contest of wit. We will be playing cards. Are you familiar with poker hands and their ranking? I am more partial to bridge myself. Fascinating. Are you familiar or not? Yes. Someone introduced the game to me when we crossed the Atlantic. Good. In this instance, We will be playing an interesting variation I discovered during my travels around Corpus Christi. I simply call it Texas Poker. Urchin introduces the rules. Rather than having each player draw 5 cards, his system has 2 cards given privately to each player, called whole cards, and 5 cards in common, which are revealed across several rounds of betting. The player who achieves the best hands by any combination of their own private cards and the public ones wins the pot, or the sum of all the money bet during the round. I find the fact that everyone can see the common cards smart and inventive, allowing for a wide variety of bluffs made by raising the amount of money one has in the pot and forcing their opponent to either match that amount or give up the round. Luck matters less than statistics and reading the opponents over the course of several rounds. It puts Alexander at a clear disadvantage. We will be starting each game with 10 tokens. The first person to take the other player's tokens wins. In order to complete the task, you must win once. Alexander frowns. I do not have that much money. Urchin shows a pity he has never felt in his entire life and comforts the little twit. There is no buy-in. You get back your tokens at the end of every game. Each round, one of us will bet 1 token which is called the small blind while the other bets 2, the big blind. We will take turns. Of course, there must be a price to failure. Urchin lifts the apparatus I decided to dub the swatter, essentially a tiny shovel used to move ash around a hearth with a leather glove glued at the end. Whoever wins gets to slap the loser. I will obviously not use my true strength or any other vampire ability to win the contest. Wait. Do you mean that I can try as many times as I wish? Yes. Urchin replies with clear enjoyment, of course. Shall we? Alexander nods and the dealer gives them 2 cards each. Urchin checks us with fluid efficiency while Alexander fumbles, glares at an uncaring Urchin, checks his cards, then checks them again. The first round is fast. Urchin bets aggressively, raising several times until Alexander folds on the 4th round. The second round, Urchin raises the stakes and Alexander follows with confidence. Urchin folds immediately. The third round is also the first to end at the card reveal. Mr. Urchin wins with 3 of a kind, the dealer says laconically. Alexander growls and mumbles with his 2 pairs, but his confidence has taken a hit and when Urchin next raises, he is flustered and barely responsive. The next 2 rounds seal the end of the first game. You win, Alexander admits with his head held high. Said head swivels to the left under the force of the blow. KSH. Ow. The man protests, massaging his reddening cheek. The swatter is not exactly light. It hurts less than losing $20. Another. The second game takes longer with Alexander no longer rising to the bait. He takes his time and deliberates before folding or calling the raise. The game lasts 11 rounds before Alexander drops his cards and his last token. Icons, KSH. Alexander's other cheek turns rosy while his temper flares. Do not be cross. He who correctly anticipates pain suffers twice, Urchin generously offers. The deflating youth takes a sip of liquor to bolster his spirits and almost spits it out. Moonshine, Urchin explains pleasantly. Strong stuff. Another. Alexander eyes the swatter with fear but he will not be deterred. This time, he tries to bluff. He loses even faster. Urchin is a master at his craft. I was taught by Dalton and Loth and he can still give me a run for my money despite the ease with which I can read his aura. Of course, vampires playing poker are as unmoving as marble statues so the hints must come from somewhere else. No matter what, Alexander's attempt at bluff is a doomed folly. Urchin metaphorically eats him alive. The fourth more balanced approach ends in painful failure. By now, Alexander looks like he cursed an entire ball of the debutantes. And their mothers. Twice. Why is it a wit test? The only thing being tried is my patience. Then perhaps you are not using the proper resource? Urchin casually remarks. The man's eyes widen. It took him 4 slaps before realizing that success would not be achieved through traditional methods. Truly, the younger generations are lost and this entire country is going to the dogs. For his 5th attempt, Alexander bets aggressively every time and still loses. For the 6th time, he massages his now purple jaw and smirks, thinking he has finally found the solution. He does not touch his cards. Every round, the decision is made by coin flips. Urchin smiles in return and trounces him once more. KSH. Why? Alexander roars. You randomized as many parameters as you could, but you will never be capable of preventing me from calculating the odds with the cards I have. So, what is left then? To get lucky. Alexander grumbles. It takes 2 more rounds for Alexander to finally get his breakthrough, but they last an hour each. I think that Urchin relented a little bit at the end. By that time, it is almost 3 in the morning and we both have better things to do. Alexander stands up and grabs the swatter. Urchin lians back with another calm smile. The youth swings as if he held his verhander. The swatter disappears as it was about to smash my associate in the face, to his unending dismay. The implement now hangs lazily from Urchin's resting hand. He didn't move. You cheated. False. I rigorously adhered to the rules. I did not move and I did not use this power to win the game. Consider this another valuable lesson. And with your eventual victory, you have completed the contest of wit. Congratulations. You only adhered to the letter of the law. And so will most people you interact with in your life. Remember, there will always be fine print and there will always be a hidden cost. The young man grunts then retreats sullenly. I approach the table where Urchin uses his power to reorder the deck without looking. The dealer has gone as well. You let him win towards the end. I may have. Contrary to you, mistress, the big lug and I are not unstoppable devours but mere courtiers. I would rather keep my interactions with the godling to the bare minimum. He was on the verge of despair and I would not want to spend another night slapping him around, no matter how vindicated it makes you feel. Understandable. Not to worry, mistress. John had something special in mind. The next night finds me, Alexander and John walking through the semi-deserted muddy streets of Marquette's riverside. Despite the decree confining them to this part of town being discreetly overturned years ago, most of the city's black and dark-skinned population still prefers to stick together and their district is mostly shunned by more affluent white folks, with a lower cost of living overall. I get giddy with anticipation the farther we go because I recognize the destination. Alexander has come loaded for bear to face the test of courage and I can already tell that his brand new revolver will be of no use. John stops in front of a low, long building with lit windows. We knock on a side door and wait. John turns to face Alexander, who squirms under the merciless gaze of the impassible giant. I feel a hint of disapproval from my most faithful follower in the way his nostrils flare, a remnant from his human days. John seldom bothers to judge people at all, so his assessment comes as a surprise. A solid 20 seconds later, a harried, disheveled woman with deep pockets under her eyes opens the door. She winces immediately when a baby shrieks from behind her. The noise is deafening. The air smells of soap and excrement. Sorry. Come on in. We follow her in a small room lit by a single lantern. Another thick door leads deeper inside, though the noise is mostly muffled as if the two parts were separate. I would know, I designed and installed the discrete sound enchantments. There are 2 fascinating facts about orphans I learned rather early in my town management experiment. The first is that, given proper care, they make some of the fiercest, most loyal followers one could hope for. Case in point, John. It must be noted that proper care goes beyond simply food and roof. The second interesting fact is that raising them properly is significantly cheaper in the long run than just letting them fend for themselves with the implied level of crime and violence. I therefore own the 3 Marquette orphanages, with this one being dedicated to the youngest children. 8 cribs adorn a room with a bare floor, while storage closets and wardrobes occupy an entire wall. A comfortable chair remains the only concession to comfort and, given the state of the nurse, it has seen little use in the past 3 hours. The special room only hosts 3 guests besides their caretaker tonight, but they certainly make up in volume what they lack in numbers. The first to screech is joined by 2 others as the bedraggled nurse rushes from crib to crib, checking on her charges. The scream concerto makes conversation difficult. We will take care of them tonight, John tells the woman. What? In her bloodshot eyes I see disbelief, and then, hope. We will take care of them until tomorrow morning. You go have a rest. You will. Yes, you have my word. To her credit, the nurse inspects the three of us with a bit of doubt before accepting. Her gaze lingers on Alexander's flustered face with obvious doubt, but when she recognizes me, her eyes widen. I am almost an open secret here. She nods once and stumbles to the door, missing the handle the first time. The second attempt is more successful. Soon, we are alone with the three deafening tiny mortals. You will not need your gun here, nor your hat or vest. You will remove them and place them by the door. Those are Christy, Thomas and Jane. They are 2, 3, and 4 months old respectively. They all have colic of the infant. Your task is to look after them and make them comfortable until sunrise. Do so, and you will have completed the test of courage. Is this a jest? John's gaze could have frozen a smelter. No. You want me to look after babies? I am no woman. John leans forwards until his and Alexander's gaze are aligned. Alexander is not a small man. It still takes a surprisingly long amount of time. Do you give up? What? Never, the godling huffs. If you think that this is a test of courage, suit yourself. I see. I will guide you through the steps at first. To begin with, Christy needs to be changed and Jane must be fed. Why does she need to be changed? Jesus Christ, she smells like. Oh. Time to get to work. I sit down with reports and cast a quick silence spell to protect myself from the worst of the yelling. Technically, this is a test of perseverance and stamina. Some of the tasks will require the courage to handle a screaming ball of fragile humanity and remove the icky excretions, so I suppose that it counts. Those are all details. What matters is that I will see a godling hand wash a soiled cloth, and that is worth more than gold. Alexander carefully picks up baby Jane according to John's instructions, following which she promptly throws up on his shirt. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Alexander returns home shortly before sunrise, dog-tired and a little foul-smelling. While his firearm stayed shiny, the rest of his outfit shows an interesting mix of body fluids. I have always been surprised by how male toddlers can spray urine and arcs at incredible range. So was Alexander. I find him the next evening in casual wear and looking significantly more sheepish than before. Are you ready for the feat of intellect? I wish I could say yes with confidence, he grumbles, shoulders slumped, but he is also a bingle and the fire of poor decision-making revives in his heart. Though I will most certainly try. Good attitude. Let us see where it gets you. I lead him through the streets of Marquette to a small school. Like the nursery, I own it and provide cheap access to the children of elite families. Minions are considerably more useful when they can read instructions, after all. We walk through a corridor decorated with painted animals to a well-lit classroom. I have Alexander sit at one of the desks, only slightly too small to be comfortable. Papers and pens have been provided. Alexander takes one look at the writings on the blackboard and shakes his head with disbelief. Solve for X? Is something the matter? You're monsters, I saw your teeth and... Here I am, doing algebra. What next? Will you ask me to memorize a speech by Cicero in Latin? I tap my chin in mock consideration, causing him to pale. Sorry, I do not mean to object. I just expected something more exciting. Hey. What? Nothing. Since you find harvest yields and compound interest boring, I assume that this will be an easy task for you. He pales even more. Compound what? You should probably get started. I install myself at the teacher's desk. I have never done that before. How exciting that I shall still find and enjoy new experiences at my age. An age which is not advanced at all, especially for a vampire. I busy myself with the last of the reports on werewolf activity and the full withdrawal of Roland forces from my land. We are free and well on our way to recovery. Given the circumstances, Constantine has decided to seize Benoit's assets and guaranteed the lion's share to me. Truly, power and being friends with the ruler have their benefits. I take a look at Alexander's sweaty form. He has barely started. My apologies, he says. For orders of operations, is it multiplication first or parentheses first? My own pen snaps between my fingers. Parentheses. Definitely parentheses. Just a momentary lapse, ha ha. The proper order should be parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division, addition and subtraction, you ant-brained village dullard. If the acronym PEMDAS is too difficult to remember, consider the phrase "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally" while I try to excuse the cobwebs between your ears. There is no need for such abuse, vampire. I can work equations. I was merely unprepared. So I have gathered, I replied readily. He walked right into that one and he knows it. Alexander blushes once more and returns to his paper. After 4 hours of effort, I collect the page and inspect it. His hand calculation of the interests are clear and rigorous. Some people forget to account for additional food for the mules when calculating how many mules a convoy needs, but he didn't. All in all, he was rigorous and systematic. I correct one error he made towards the end which I shall attribute to mental exhaustion and reluctantly decide to give him a passing grade. Well, you would have noticed your mistake if you had waited a day and gone over the calculations once more. It was a fairly minor problem to start with, so I shall accept that you successfully completed a feat of intellect. Thank you. Only the last feat is left then. Indeed, we shall complete it tomorrow. He sighs heavily before tidying up his desk. There's little left of the foolish youth who threatened me with a piece of wood. You are not quite what I expected, he finally says. Lucky you. I know you have been teaching me a lesson and I am grateful. No. I just wanted to have him slapped, peed on, and then subjected to paperwork. My father, the esteemed Colonel Bingle, taught me notions of valor and courage by sharing tales of his adventures as a soldier of Her Majesty Queen Victoria in India. So this is why I have never met him. He was on the other side of the planet. Good riddance. I apologize for my earlier reaction. By placing deeds of valor at the top of my priorities, I have forgotten all the work and support behind every victory, the steel behind every sword and the engineer behind every weapon. Indeed, even the tireless mothers and nurses who raise the next generation of heroes deserve not just our consideration, but our undying support as well. He nods to himself while I stop my growing horror from affecting my poise. The hand that tiles, that counts. The one that holds a babe to a breast are just as worthy of support as the one that holds a gun, nay, worthier indeed. For it must be protected. And I shall. You have opened my eyes to my own shortcomings, Miss Delaney. Despite your curse, you carry with you the wisdom of the ages. Yes, of course. How intriguing that you would figure it out so soon. I have come to a decision concerning my future, but first, I shall complete your last task. This is definitely not going to return to bite me in the posterior. Asterisk. For the last night, I have decided to conduct a simple experiment. I have given Alexander an artifact key to vampire essence and dumped him in the middle of the Illinois wilderness with the instruction to cut a path to one of the 3 vampires present here. John and Urchin do not seem to mind the little outing, and so we split apart a couple of miles away from our bright-eyed young aspirant hunter. The concept of vampire tracking devices is nothing new. Masked squads used them to hunt me down back in France, using the absence of essence to find my location despite Nashoba's earrings. Constantine is capable of making somebody he has been reluctant to distribute them outside of specific missions, citing blatant favoritism and sending the wrong message as reasons to refuse me access. The artifact Alexander now wields is a prototype of my own design. I am rather confident that it should not work properly. I want to see what happens when shoddy workmanship confronts the godling's luck. What will come out on top? Will he stumble upon one of us or upon some sort of treasure instead? I am confident that he will not simply err over the plains for hours, smashing his big toe against errant roots. Some part of me remembers the warning that cruel fates await those who attempt to experiment on godlings. I simply assumed that those would be brand runes on their chest with the hot iron sorts of experiments, not the 3 parts practical joke experiments. Besides, my intuition is telling me to proceed with some strange insistence, and I have yet to be disappointed. I have chosen a spot I sometimes visit, a bend in a nearby water reservoir with a lone rock covered with moss. When the wind blows, the entire pond ripples and the reflection of the trees above grows twisted and menacing. I close my eyes and meditate for the first time in a month. 15 minutes later, I jump to my feet and whistle to call Metis. Something is wrong. My intuition screams at something in the direction where Urchin left. I ride out immediately. A moment later, a red flare climbs through the fall air, warning the plains of an imminent danger. Metis gallops like the wind, and it takes barely a minute for us to arrive. I immediately hear the sounds of battle. In the valley below, Urchin and an unknown man fight while a wounded Alexander finishes climbing the clearing's lone tree. A few bloodstains and handprints decorate the bark. The scent is quite enticing, as Urchin's opponent has realized. As I jump from Metis unhurriedly, I note prominent, wide cheekbones, long braided brown hair and a white tunic that has clearly seen better days. He still has a simple knife attached to his belt, though he either forgot he had or decided that his claws would serve him best. I suspect the former. The curious fighter smells of young courtier with the acidic aftertaste of a rogue. More importantly, his aura is quite peculiar. Should I kill him, mistress? Urchin asks without removing his eyes from his foe. They circle each other with the rogue casting eager glances at Alexander. Disable him. Have fun. Oh, I will. The rogue has seen me, but since I do not move, he decides to attack Urchin instead. However, the wily Vanheim had merely been delaying and now shows the full extent of his capabilities. With every throw, knives bloom over the rogue's arms as he protects his vitals. Urchin dances around him, exploiting his superior range to cut sinews and sever bones. In desperation, the rogue turns to Alexander and charges, only to receive a knife in the back. It misses the heart by a finger. Sensing danger, the foe twists on himself and jumps. With a high-pitched cry, he kicks Urchin with both legs, sending the courtier back with a grunt. I think I heard a rib crack. Despite the apparent setback, Urchin smirks. His opponent falls gracefully on his feet, then immediately stumbles. Urchin hamstrung him. On both knees. The Vanheim rises and strikes at the same time. His heaviest knife buries itself in the rogue's heart. I give the victor a single nod. Excellent performance, Urchin. Nearly flawless. Thank you, mistress. Now let us see what this is all about. I seize the prone rogue by the throat and prepare to drink. His essence is so peculiar that for a moment, I believe that he is another Vanheim. I bite deep. The plains. Life used to be good, or so I was told. When I was 3, a plague came that made people's skin become like pebbles. When I was 4, another plague hit, one that had people empty their bowels until they fell. The white hunters made towering piles of skulls out of bison and left the meat to rot. I was left alone. Ako told us that we could bend or take from those who had much. We left on horseback with other Nokarni to raid and find food, weapons, and slaves. We rode deep. The white men were at war with each other, but the farther we went, the more we saw. The white men are everywhere and there are so many of them, many more than all of us, the Kiowas and Apaches together. Ako left this night to reflect and came back with a revelation. He found a way to make us strong. So strong. We will be one tribe and we will know where to find each other. We will be victorious. And so, very thirsty? I pull back and lick my lips, enjoying the pleasant soreness of rogue essence. I know why Benoit rode west with such abandon. I know why he would risk it all. And I know why we have no choice but to follow. I notice that John arrived and that Alexander has since climbed down from his tree. Gentlemen, we have a trip ahead of us. Our kind has a new progenitor. Tope continued.